Welcome to Blaze News, The Mandate, Day 15. I'm Jill Savage. Tonight on the agenda, Jordan's King Abdullah II met with President Trump today, just after Trump suggested that he could halt billions of dollars in aid to Jordan and Egypt if they refuse to accept Palestinians from Gaza. However, that won't be necessary. The king agreed to accept 2,000 sick children from Gaza, and Trump called this move a beautiful gesture and said that he's confident that something similar can be worked out with Egypt. Here's a part of their meeting.
President, I truly believe that with all the challenges that we have in the Middle East, that I finally see somebody that can take us across the finish line to bring stability, peace, and prosperity to all of us in the region.
Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem accused the FBI of leaking information about an ICE raid planned for the Los Angeles area, according to the LA Times. And Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, confirmed that the leak appears to have come from the FBI and announced a criminal investigation.
We think it's come from inside, and we know the first leak of Aurora is under current investigation. We think we identified that person under investigation right now. The California leak, Secretary Noem, she's correct. Some of the information we're receiving tends to lead toward the FBI.
Meanwhile, Trump's deportation plan is well underway. A plane of 200 Venezuelans are returning now to their home country. Trump also had a recent court win, with a federal judge agreeing to dismiss the Mar-a-Lago documents case, just as the request of the Justice Department. And this officially brings an end to that case, but it'll likely trigger another push from the Democrats to review Jack Smith's report on the case. At the Paris AI Summit, Vice President JD Vance promised to end woke AI. Watch this.
Now, over the last few years, we've watched as governments, businesses, and nonprofit organizations have advanced unpopular and, I believe, downright ahistorical social agendas through AI. In the U.S., we had AI image generators trying to tell us that George Washington was black or that America's doughboys in World War I were in fact women. Now, we laugh at this now, and of course it was ridiculous, but we have to remember the lessons from that ridiculous moment. And what we take from it is that the Trump administration will ensure that AI systems developed in America are free from ideological bias and never restrict our citizens' right to free speech.
The important thing is that we save the cats. Moving on to Disney, they are changing their DEI programs to focus more on business outcomes. They're going to change their diversity and inclusion performance factor that it used to evaluate executive compensation with a new talent strategy, which will be more focused on how values drive the success of the business. What a novel concept. Today, in front of the Senate Banking Committee, Fed Chair Jerome Powell committed to never creating a central bank digital currency. Watch this.
Something that concerns me a lot is the idea that we would even look like China in any way. So can I have your commitment that as long as you're the chairman of the Federal Reserve System, that we will never have a central bank digital currency?
Yes.
And the USAID scandal just keeps getting deeper. A report from Middle East Forum, it's a U.S. think tank, reveals the agency gave $164 million in approved grants to a radical organization, and at least $122 million go into groups aligned with designated terrorists and their supporters. And in the feel-good story of the day, President Trump signed an executive order mandating all federal agencies cooperate with DOGE to slash the size of the government workforce and eliminate waste. But when we look back at it, the ICE raid leaks, they're proving to be one of the biggest challenges so far in implementing the MAGA mandate. It's clear now how deeply entrenched this resistance is within this government. And when it comes to something as straightforward even as enforcing immigration laws. For new Attorney General Pam Bondi, this is the first major test for her leadership, and she's made it clear that those responsible for the leaks will be held accountable. But the fact that this is even happening shows how difficult this battle will be against the deep state. If ICE operations can be sabotaged within by the FBI, then what else is being compromised? The reality of this is taking on the system that refuses to give up power, and it's just the beginning of the fight. So now let's bring in Blaze News Editor-in-Chief, Matthew Peterson. So MP, when we look at this, battle with ICE and the raids that are going on. And then we get news that it's likely coming from within, right? The call is coming from inside the House, and that is coming from the FBI. What's your take?
Well, I mean, just first off, everything you just said is what winning looks like. Everything you just said in this opening today on the agenda is what winning looks like. And this is no exception, because this is the product of going on offense. What's happening now is the Trump administration is going on offense. They're conducting these raids. They're enforcing the law. And when you do that, you're going to get pushback from everyone who's recalcitrant. And you're basically going to clean out the Aegean stables, the dirty stables of government that haven't been cleaned in centuries. And those people are going to reveal themselves. And that's what's going on now. So when it comes to the FBI, Pam Bondi's absolutely correct. She needs to go after anyone. Anyone who leaks needs to be prosecuted, needs to be made an example of. The word needs to go out. If you leak this time, remember last time, unprecedented dangerous leaks were the hallmark of the first Trump term. I mean, no one's ever seen leaks like what happened and it was dangerous to national security, the most sensitive information, most sensitive conversations, leak after leak after leak. This time, if that happens, these people need to be prosecuted. And I think it's a good thing, because let them show themselves, right? And increasingly, these people will leave when they are meeting the justice they deserve.
Yeah, to your point of that, there's so much going on right now. We didn't even have time to cover absolutely everything that is happening in the day. And on any other normal day in a news cycle, we would probably be talking about the fact that there's no central bank digital currency.
Yeah.
That Jerome Powell came out and said, yeah, we're never going to do that, right? That has been years of buildup for basically a 10-second clip here on the show today, because there are so many other things that are happening right now.
Yeah, and all these things are again, indicative of the Trump administration and the good guys being on offense and the other side reacting, even with Disney, right? What Disney is reacting to cultural change. So this is good. This means we're plowing forward, and you're seeing the waves come from the prow of the ship. You know, they're moving back. But it also means that there's a lot of mop-up work to do, and what you see at the FBI with the ICE leaks is indicative of that, right? And it's time now to clean those stables and get these people out of there.
Well, a friend of the show, Steve Friend, he wrote on X today, he said that he's hearing that former FBI employees are unhappy that new Attorney General is emailing them memos in the evening because they're off the clock. He says, please keep this up, Pam Bondi. So apparently, Pam Bondi is also working nights and weekends. It's not just DOGE and the team.
Yeah, our friend Steve Friend has a empty garden of Fs, as they say. You know, God bless him, he's exactly right. And it's interesting that this is now a constant theme of people coming in with energy from the Trump administration and bothering bureaucrats because they don't work 9 to 5. They're dedicated. Again, they have the political will to do what needs doing, and they don't care what hours they work.
Well, the winning will still continue. Don't go anywhere. When we come back, can a House task force put countless conspiracy theories to rest? We'll unpack today's bombshell announcement just ahead. All those good news is, now we have to look at what the economists are saying. They're forecasting a depression, not a recession, a depression by the year 2030. And it's a perfect storm right now for Social Security and Medicare, as they're hit with a breaking point for the largest generation that's about to hit retirement. And a smaller workforce means a smaller tax base. And you pair that with our growing national debt and rising cost of living, and you have a pretty big problem. So what are you going to do now to protect your future and your family? Well, gold is a safe haven in hard economic times, and Birch Gold makes it easy to diversify your portfolio and put your savings into physical gold. Birch Gold can help you transition an existing IRA or 401k into an IRA in physical gold, and it doesn't cost you a penny out of pocket. So protect your future today. Text Jill to 989898 and get your free info kit on gold and a copy of the ultimate guide for gold in the Trump era with the foreword written by Donald Trump Jr. There's no obligation. It's only going to be information. So Birch Gold has earned the trust of countless Americans looking to safeguard their savings, and you can count on them too. Text my name, Jill, to the number 989898 today. The Epstein files have been getting more attention recently, and this next piece should definitely add to that. Earlier today, Glenn Beck said that Kash Patel will release the Epstein files on his first day as FBI director. Watch.
The only thing I care about is the scandal of the pedophiles, and in the next 10 days, you're going to see the Epstein file released.
In the next 10 days?
Next 10 days.
Oh,
Yep.
please.
You think in the next 10 days the whole thing's going to be released?
Yeah.
And what kind of information you have to be able to be that certain about it?
I plead the fifth.
In the next 10 days?
The next 10 days.
Oh,
Glenn,
please.
Yeah.
stop it.
Next 10 days.
You're
I'm telling
teasing millions who want that list.
Day number 1, Kash Patel walks in. By the end of the day, it will be released.
That is certainly a bombshell. Here to break this down with us is Blaze senior politics editor Chris Bedford. So, Chris, I mean, does Glenn know something that we don't? What's going on here?
I mean, Glenn doesn't bluff. If he says he knows something, and you see that twinkle in his eye and that smile, you know him. I believe it when he's up to that. It sounds like he's got some mischief up his sleeve and has been talking to people who are intent on this. Kash Patel, who's obviously related to this, has been someone who has had access to these documents. He's talked about these documents in the past, particularly regarding the JFK assassination, what is being held back, and how it's important for the American people to be able to see it. And in the first Trump administration, when the president promised to release some of these documents, he was frightened away from it by the skiff, essentially. He was frightened away from it by the intelligence assets, the people who said, oh, this would break norms, this would be a threat to that part of national security, this part of national security. And all of the credibility of those types of people has really been shattered. It's turned out that over the last couple of years, they have largely been protecting their own. They've put secrecy over openness as far as the American people can go. The incredible increase in the percentage of classified documents that go through a government has gone through the roof in the last 50 years in a way that was never true before. So steps like these, when you've got an intelligence community pushing back, their word carries a lot less value than it did previously. And at the same time, the Trump administration is kind of high on their successes. The American people have responded positively to their decisions. Democrats have been freaking out, basically howling into the wind to no avail, and they're feeling empowered to do more.
So I guess one could argue that if you didn't want the Epstein list out, which presumably some powerful people do not, this would further your antagonism towards the confirmation of Kash Patel, and you would work even harder to stop that, which leads me to what a great time to talk about where we are in terms of the confirmation battle with Patel, since they're still, flinging mud at him. Has anything, changed in the last 24 hours, do you think, or is he still looking like he's sailing towards success?
There are still clear seas ahead. The problem for Kash Patel is that there's a lot more ocean ahead than was initially expected. Mm-hmm. And storms can absolutely always sneak up on you. Democrats have pulled every trick in the book. They've used every single tool at their disposal, parliamentary procedure, to prolong this for as long as they've been capable of doing so. And in the hopes in that time of being able to dig up enough dirt on him or cause enough trouble for him to get some Republicans to pull back. As we've seen with Lisa Murkowski's recent switch on Tulsi Gabbard, that vote will be later tonight, at least it's scheduled for around midnight. As we've seen with a couple of other different aspects, the RFK confirmation, which is expected by tomorrow, you realize that the Republican willingness to push back is kind of ending. I mean, you had Mitch McConnell vote for cloture, which is just a procedural vote, for going ahead on Tulsi Gabbard's vote. I think if Democrats and squishy and neocon Republicans had been successful in sinking Pete Hegseth's nomination, then you would not have seen someone like McConnell vote for cloture and to move ahead. They would have felt empowered. But success breeds success, and failure breeds failure. And the neoconservatives and the Democrat allies are in retreat at the moment. They're not in power.
Well, it's a big day for declassifying documents. Representative Anna Paulina Luna has been appointed by the House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer. She's going to lead a task force on the declassification of federal secrets. And her and Comer had a press conference earlier today. Let's take a look.
We'll be conducting investigations into the following: the assassinations of JFK, RFK, and Dr. Martin Luther King, unidentified aerial phenomena, also known as UAPs, unidentified submerged objects, also known as USOs, the Epstein client list, the origins of COVID-19, and the 9/11 files.
Right. So we've heard the Trump executive order. Now there's going to be an entire task force for this in the House. So how is the deep state going to try and block this one?
Oh, they're so up the creek on this. They're in so much trouble. I mean, all of these sorts of things could have been treated by a lot of responsible society as conspiracy theories just 8 years ago. I mean, there was a period of time where, like, basically the only person on air who was talking about UFOs with any kind of major platform was Tucker Carlson, and it annoyed the heck out of his bosses. And it even made some eyebrows among his friends. Although he developed, it was kind of funny, a really strange kind of hippie fan base because of it. People you wouldn't expect to be huge Tucker fans turned out to be huge Tucker fans because of his work with UFOs. But at the same time, and now that huge rush of Trump insanity and completely fake news stories, you would be forgiven for not noticing that the Pentagon acknowledged their existence. The federal government acknowledged their existence. And as some senators have pointed out, and powerful people I've talked to who have access to U.S. classified intelligence, you got a couple of different questions here. Either they're man-made, and we have no idea what they are, which is extremely concerning from a defense point of view, or they're not man-made, and we have no idea what they are, which is extremely concerning from a defense point of view. Either way, these are things that ought to be known and stop being knocked down as simple conspiracy theories. The same thing about the origins of COVID, which was used to shut down media outlets or attack media outlets, undermine their credibility and slow their reach, choke them out in social media and hit their profits in advertising. And used to run doctors and other well-regarded people in the medical establishment out of that medical establishment from questioning these sorts of things. The MLK assassination, of course, which has some questions, but significantly less. RFK, JFK, these are sorts of things that it's a society that moves towards openness and is no longer letting the IC decide what we're allowed to see and when we're allowed to see it. A lot of this stuff is kind of already out there. A lot of this stuff has been discussed. And I do actually suspect that as opposed to finding some kind of crazy Atlantis conspiracy behind it, more and more documents and more openness will put an end to some of the conspiracy theories, will defeat how these sorts of things came out. You'll start to understand, all right, here's what actually was known. And those sorts of things are good. Light is good on these on dangerous questions.
Yeah, the more light, the better. You have to admit, it was somewhat hilarious when she teased this. The congresswoman said, it's bigger than aliens. And then it turns out because it's all the things, all the clickbaity things are all in this task force. We're going to do RFK, we're going to do JFK, we're going to do all the things. Great. Fantastic. We should also get a little update on DOGE because, DOGE is still operating and moving. I mean, just to pick two things from today, you have cutting $900 million apparently from the Department of Education. And then you have Elon Musk tweeting about, we will absolutely look into individuals in the federal government with a oddly high net worth and, make sure that there's no untoward behavior, which has to really scare the pants off a lot of people right now in Washington, D.C. What's your take on how DOGE is evolving?
And you can make a lot of money if you simply make the exact same trades, buys and sells that Nancy Pelosi and her husband make the second that they make them. You can do quite well in the stock market. It makes you think that people who do have inside knowledge are acting on that in a way that is illegal. So if you look at who's making all that money and where it's stored, it's good. And it's also good to see the executive order come through. We're coming down to a fight with the courts. The courts, and I'm going to go into this in my piece in the Beltway brief tomorrow, so I won't give away too much before we talk about it then. But the courts, what they're doing essentially here is lawless. Congress has surrendered a huge amount of its authority over the executive, and now the courts are trying to claim that the executive doesn't have authority over the executive, that the blob is some kind of creature, this endangered creature that must be protected in the rainforest, like a moth or a butterfly. How dare you go after this? No one's in charge of this. It exists on its own. It's its own ecosystem. It has its own rights. And that's completely ridiculous. That the fact that the Trump administration is still pushing on every single one of these levels and giving more authority to it, as President Trump did with his executive order today, saying that DOGE is now actually officially designated as having authority in the federal government, is going to be great. And they're going to win these lawsuits. The thing is, you got a judge in Manhattan, an Obama appointee, claiming that agencies aren't allowed to have access to information within their own agencies. That doesn't make sense. Not only is that just a complete break of separation of powers, but it's stupid. It's just patently stupid. The problem, and I'll go into the problems for why it's going to take a while tomorrow, but I do think that in the end, this next round of judicial lawfare is going to be defeated.
Yeah, and today we saw Representative Eli Crane come out, and he has articles of impeachment out now for a U.S. District Judge, Paul Engelmayer. And this is the guy who was blocking the freezing of the funds being audited by DOGE. So I know you're going to be writing about this tomorrow, but at this point with these judges and everything that we're seeing, is this going to be the beginning of this? Are we going to see more moves like this?
Well, I think we're going to see most of that come from the Supreme Court, because I will tell you right now that the United States Congress does not impeach enough federal judges. There are some absolutely batty, crazy moonbats out there who are sitting on the bench and have been for a long time, because Congress doesn't even think to take away their judgeship. Like literally people who have gone half crazy on the bench, or people who are complete and total political partisans on the bench. But you can't do that with a 2-vote majority, and I don't see Democrats joining. You need to get to, I think, 2/3 of the House of Representatives in order to actually be able to change that and to impeach a judge. And then I think it goes to the Senate. It's been a little while since I reviewed all of these things. So I like the moves to put them on notice, but don't expect the Congress with a 2-vote majority to start kicking these judges out of their courthouses anytime soon.
Well, I mean, the more they talk about it, the better, though. I want to hear Republicans seriously talk about what should happen, which is that when you manifest this level of politics, which is obvious because of the outrageous, it's not ignorance, right? I mean, they
know the law and they're breaking it. They're violating the spirit of it. They're violating the letter of it.
Yeah, you can't say this is ignorance of the Constitution. You can't assume that they're fundamentally lacking that many brain cells. You have to say that this is egregious political behavior and should be treated as such. We should talk briefly about RFK, though. I don't want to forget about him, since RFK is waiting to be confirmed as Secretary of HHS. Washington Post has recently ran this piece analyzing his past statements on vaccines. Of course, chastising his claims that vaccines are not tested vigorously enough. I imagine that there are some special interests behind this article. There's special interests on all sides of this. What do you make of this article, this attack, and what do you think of his trajectory moving forward, given that they're still going to be throwing a lot of mud at him as well?
I mean, it was so perfectly illustrated by the back and forth between Rand Paul and the chairman of RFK's committee, Cassidy, when Rand Paul was saying, maybe we should show just a little bit of humility in these matters of medical science. These are two doctors going back and forth. I mean, we were told, sit down and shut up. And literally, you could be arrested. People floated arresting you and banning you from society if you didn't take the COVID vaccine. Cases were shut down left and right. My wife, who was in her late 20s at the time, suffered immediate heart problems from this and had to wear monitors on it. And the doctor told her in Washington, oh, yeah, I've seen many such cases. No one was allowed to talk about that in the news. My cousin's son, who was a teenager and an athlete, had immediate heart problems. And he had to whisper about it because he would be threatened with losing his job at his fancy school if the parents in the area found out that he had questioned this. So I'm not really, and I don't think the American people are interested in people saying that the science is settled. That's complete bollocks. Science is not a religion, although it's treated by a religion by all those people who post it in front of their houses like it's the Nicene Creed. In this house, we believe in science. Well, science is a method where you go towards discovery. And a lot of these vaccines, I mean, the reality is, just like the ingredients in the foods that we ate as children and our parents ate as children, on the same products have changed dramatically in the last couple of years. The level of vaccinations that children are exposed to have upped dramatically. And some of those are safe and some of those are fine. But the schedules, you're not even allowed to question that. It's become a partisan thing on pediatricians' websites. You will go by the CDC's guidelines. You will go by their schedule. And if you want to slow the schedule down, you are putting your patients in danger, and your children are not welcome in this establishment. You're not allowed to have any control. In loco parente has become in loco doctor or in loco school. They're the first people who have authority over your children. Bill Cassidy and Rand Paul went back and forth on whether or not you should be giving this type of hepatitis vaccine to children And Cassidy's thing was, well, some of their prostitute and drug addict parents don't want to tell us, so therefore all children must get it, or they can't leave the hospital. That's completely insane. It's a wild thing to say to enforce that on all American children, but that's kind of the basics, and it's the level of authority and bullying control that they feel they have, moral authority. And, you could have convinced the American people of that about 5 years ago, but absolutely not again.
Very well said. Cosign on all of that. Bedford, so good to see you once again.
I'll see you tomorrow.
All right, when we come back, former Trump White House press secretary Sean Spicer will join us next. A perfect segue here to talk about Anthony Fauci and COVID and the pandemic in 2020. But Dr. Richard Ebright, he's a molecular biologist from Rutgers University. He's had Anthony Fauci on his radar since the 2001 anthrax scare, after which Dick Cheney empowered him in the NIAID with the authority for the funding for the biodefense that was once solely reserved for the Department of Defense. In the next episode of Matt Kibbe's documentary series, The Cover-Up, he joins Dr. Ebright as he walks through a series of embarrassments that begins with the recreation of the deadly 1918 Spanish flu, and it culminates with the coming of the COVID-19 crisis. So together, Matt Kibbe and Richard Ebright connect the dots, they trace all the funding, and they give you the answers that you've been demanding about the years of the dark research, the fraud, and the corruption that is surrounding Anthony Fauci. It's the fatal culture of hubris and grift that the left has had so much destruction and all the mistrust that has been left in its wake. You can see episode 4 of The Cover-Up, Smoking Gun, on BlazeTV. It releases this Thursday. Become a subscriber at FauciCoverup.com/mandate and use the code SMOKINGGUN for $30 off your subscription. That's FauciCoverup.com/mandate. Code SMOKINGGUN for $30 off your subscription. In a recent Newsweek piece, former White House press secretary Sean Spicer argued that while executive orders can be an important tool in shaping immigration policy, they're not enough to create lasting change. Without legislative action, these policies can easily be reversed by future administrations and leaving America's immigration system in a constant state of uncertainty. So, what steps should be taken to implement real long-term reform? Sean Spicer joins us now to break it all down. So thanks for joining us here on the show tonight. Sean, let's look at immigration because it is at the forefront of this administration. So what needs to be done to bolster these executive orders that we've already seen from the Trump administration?
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Look, my sort of motto is what happens with an executive order can be undone with an executive order. And you've seen this tit for tat. President Biden coming in day one, undoing a lot of the Trump stuff. President Biden ordering his team, President Trump then ordering his team to undo a lot of the Biden stuff. My point is right now, we have at a party been talking about the problems with immigration, the problems at our border, the problems with the visa system. And we have a president that's leading on immigration and border security. We have a Republican Congress and a Republican Senate. So what we need to do is to codify that stuff in law to make sure that a future Democratic president, God help us, doesn't undo all the progress the president is making. I mean, there's no question a lot can be done through executive order. What President Biden did was basically gaslight us. We can't do anything. I can't have this happen. President Trump, within hours, showed that wasn't true. But what I want to do is to make sure that while we have Republican majorities, that we codify in law the changes that need to happen so that we don't kick the can down the road and we're negotiating against ourselves with Democrats that want to institute open borders, don't want to, have as many CBP officers and ICE officers. We need to take as much as we can, put it in a law, and make it almost impossible for the Democrats to undo.
Well, amen to that, Sean. But as you know, Congress has been broken for a long time. And as you also know, and we like to talk here on Blaze News, The Mandate, one of the biggest obstacles to President Trump implementing his mandate is the Republicans, unfortunately, in Congress. So that being said, when you look at the situation now and you have debate about one big, beautiful bill, maybe passing another bill, it's a complicated situation. What do you think is the best route forward for Congress? How do we get this done?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would, in a perfect world, I'd say one big, beautiful bill, because you only have to do it once and you get everything done. The problem with that is that in order to get the offsets for the taxes, and this is all like Washington, speak, it's going to be a lot. It's going to take a long time, and you lose some steam and you lose something. Lindsey Graham and the Senate, I think, want to get points on the board. So the first bill that the Senate would pass would deal with defense, border, and energy. Get that out of the way, lock it in. It's like one of those game shows where you put enough points on the board and then they lock it in and then you move to the next level. Yeah. I just think that to me is easier, because the problem with the tax issue right now is you've got a bunch of deficit hawks, right? I mean, you guys are down there in Texas. You got Chip Roy and others, Jody Arrington, who want a lot more offsets. They want to cut spending. And I think that's great. I love what DOGE is doing. I love the reforms that President Trump is instituting in government. But in order to not affect the deficit as much as some on our side they have to find additional offsets. That's going to take time. So as much as I would love personally to have one big, beautiful bill and get it done, I just think that the longer that we take, it's like anything else. Those self-help books where they tell you, wake up, do the hardest thing you can, and then move on. I feel like right now, get this thing done, get the energy, the border, and immigration and defense done, and then figure the tax thing out. Because the biggest problem with the tax stuff is it's like a seesaw. Some members want more of the state and local deductions taken off, primarily those guys from New York and New Jersey and California, and some want, tax cuts in other areas. And each costs, wherever you put one thing on the scale, somebody else falls off the other end. There's widespread agreement, and this gets back to the initial part of your question, on the issues of border security and immigration, energy, and defense, what we need to do. So that's going to be much easier to just get done. The problem is if you're Speaker Mike Johnson, it takes a lot of the sweeteners off the table that could get people on the same page for the tax bill, and he doesn't want to have to go through the process twice.
All right. Well, I just have to say for the record, Sean Spicer right there agreeing with what I've been trying to say for a while now. Let's just get this bill out there and get it done. Let's not wait. Right, Jill?
That is right. But I did look it up last night because I said I was going to. 34 Republicans voted against the CR last December to make sure that this wasn't going to happen. And I don't necessarily disagree with them, right? It's not like we've passed a budget in decades at this point. So they're like, why are we going to just go through and pass another CR? But now, Sean, this does create a huge problem with such slim majorities there in D.C. that those sweeteners that you're talking about, those are going to be few and far between right now.
Yes and no. I agree with you. But part of the issue on a whole host of issues, immigration, government spending, everything, including Gaza, has been one excuse after another for decades. Here's why we can't do it. It's never been done this way. And what President Trump has been showing us in the first few weeks is that we got to think outside the box. We got to try new ways, new approaches, and be willing to get things done, that we claim we're for, right? For years, Republicans have talked about lower spending, getting rid of programs, zeroing out federal workforce. And finally, Elon Musk comes in, and he was just in the Oval Office a few moments ago, talking about the fact that the Treasury Department doesn't even list or categorize the contracts and the spending that they do, so that they can't tell you how many people who are on the do not do business with list, how many dollars are being spent to a particular category, because they literally won't categorize and code their spending. These reforms are needed. And when you can show some of these people who have very valid concerns, I share them. Why do we keep kicking the can down the road on the CR or on raising the debt ceiling and to get told we need to deal with spending, and then what happens the day after you pass it? Everyone in Congress goes home to their district, forgets about it until a year later when we get jammed up against the deadline and told that we got to do it all over again. So my view is if President Trump can show us a path forward where we can say we're saving the government money, we're shrinking the government, we're getting rid of inefficiencies, waste, fraud, and abuse as they are doing, it's going to give a lot more people hope that we're actually moving in the right direction and not just kicking the can down the road. But I keep thinking to myself, if Elon and President Trump hadn't exposed this spending at USAID and what I think will now Treasury and probably DOD and then Department of Education, we'd never know about it. it would keep happening and keep getting spending, and we'd be funding trans carnivals in Ireland for decades on end. So I think that what gives me hope is finally somebody is doing something about the problem instead of just making up excuses why we can't.
Yeah, it's such a great point. One of the things that's been missing, I think, for a long time, and was sort of missing last time, I think, through really no fault of the administration's, but just sort of the way that he came into office suddenly, right, is that you have to set this debate up in the public mind, and that's why people like us are looking, going, I've never seen such a beautiful setup in my lifetime, keep going. But what do you think on the substantial level, speaking about this war against the administrative state? I mean, Trump is literally trying to do what no Republican president has ever been able to accomplish post-World War II, which is roll back this large, massive bureaucracy. This is the, one best shot that we have. So if you look at how the next year is going to unfold, putting aside the budget for a minute, are we just going to keep pushing forward like this? Like, what are the next obstacles and roadblocks? Because as we know, there's a lot of people who are being deeply affected every hour by what's going on, who, are not entirely without power. So what are the next steps? Does the empire strike back here, or what do you think's coming?
Yeah, this is such a great issue. I love this issue, but I would just say this: when the president was ushering the reporters out of the Oval Office, they asked about Matt Fogel, that prisoner, or whatever term is appropriate for him, that's being returned from Russia, and he said he'll be here at 10 o'clock if you want to come see him. And I was like, God, can you imagine? Biden wouldn't even say 10 a.m.
Yes.
to be there. The idea that we have a president. I watched last night, the Marine was standing outside the West Wing entrance, which signals the president is in the Oval Office. And it was like 7:30 last night. And I was like, oh my God, things have changed. But let me just say this, without getting into my long diatribe on this. President Trump not serving consecutive terms may make him the most consequential president of modern history, if not ever. Because when you serve back-to-back terms, you just keep going. You keep, got the same staff in office and you keep moving. 4 years out of office gave him the opportunity to think about the people, the process, and the policies. What do I mean by that? He knew who the good people to hire were and who the bad people to keep out were. He knew the process by which to get things done and the process by which people would try to stop him. And then thirdly, he knew the policies that he wanted to enact and the policies he wanted to avoid. And when you have that time to think that deliberately, not just Donald J. Trump, the president, but his team, you don't think Tom Homan came into office and within hours was able to put together raids. He had thought about it. He had planned on it. He had coordinated on it. All of these things that President Trump is doing in the past 3 weeks have been thought out, planned out, because they've had time, in some cases years, to think to themselves, if I get back in, this is what I will do.
Yeah. That is so well said. And I couldn't agree more, just with the fact that everything has been so thought through this time around. It really is a breath of fresh air, because we're talking about DOGE and everything that's going along with that, with the cutting of government waste. But the fact that they've been able to do it from day one has been so much more powerful. Sean Spicer, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
MP, when I look at that, it is one of those things that you do have to kind of step back and say, okay, let's look at Donald Trump in the big picture, even though he's just starting his second term. What we're already seeing from him is so historic that, I mean, again, we can't cover every single thing that he's doing on the show every day.
You don't want to get ahead of yourself and pronounce these things, but that's what I get paid to do. I get ahead of people. I'm always ahead, right? So, and I'm going to say this looks like FDR's first 100 days. That's the equivalent. That's the magnitude of what we're seeing if this keeps on happening. So you can't keep up with it all. You're seeing massive, not resistance, but rout and reaction to what's plowing forward. And as he says, that the fact that there was that staggered term in between, these people are ready. They're tan, rested, and ready. They know what they're doing. And guess what? They aren't even all in there. I mean, Rubio was in there first. I mean, talking to people from the State Department, they haven't even fully staffed out, the political appointees at state. Like, this is it's not even done yet. It's not even staffed yet. So you haven't seen anything yet.
Listen, you love it. I love it. The mandate is here. We are in agreement on this. Unfortunately, not everyone loves it. CNN claims that we're on the edge of a constitutional crisis. We have your responses right after this.
We are 3 weeks into the second Trump presidency, 3 weeks, and tonight there are warnings that the U.S. is dangerously close to a constitutional crisis.
What a joke from Caitlin Collins and CNN. I had to go to X and ask you, this had to be the poll question today. What do you make of all of this? CNN saying that we're dangerously close to a constitutional crisis. Well, the results, everybody, all the replies came flooding in. Our buddy, Terry Schilling, came back first with us. He said, we better not let this crisis go to waste then. Let's save America. A good old Rahm Emanuel quote there.
Emanuel, I like it. Terry's very witty there. He's exactly right. Let's not let it go to waste. We got to save America, and we're going to come together in this crisis, and we're going to do things, damn it.
We are. Adrian Slade said that we've been digging out of an actual constitutional crisis for the last 3 weeks. He flipped it on its head there.
Yeah, it's almost like we've been in a constitutional crisis for the last century or so, and it's been building and building and building, including having a senile old man at the nominal head of this office. So I tend to agree with him.
And rounding it all out, Secret Fire says the crisis is that the bureaucracy has supplanted representative government. I think he's after Pat Gray's heart there.
Yeah, I mean, that is the crisis. That's it. That's the battle of the mandate, is versus that bureaucracy, that administrative state that's grown up, the permanent government. Absolutely.
Well, they don't like that we have so much winning, right? What you see on this show is probably the exact equal opposite of what they are reporting on CNN. We're saying, oh my gosh, Trump is doing this executive order and that executive order and cutting the Department of Education by $900 million. Oh, wow, these are great things. And CNN's like, I don't know. Who gave you that authority?
Yeah, it is crazy because when they say constitutional government or a constitutional crisis, what they mean is the permanent bureaucracy is threatened. And right now, the wind is at our back. The ship is, speeding along across the water, slicing through the waves, and we're moving fast, and we're moving directionally towards something we call winning. We're not tired of winning yet. But because we're winning, the next step here is to get really clear on what the objectives and goals are as we win. It's not going to be enough to just, move in the right direction. Right now, we have lots of smart people who are very talented, who can actually move towards achieving determinate goals. And I think that's the next step for the administration and for a lot of the public to start wrapping their mind around these clear goals. And I believe that the administration will start laying a lot of this out as people actually bring in their staffs and come into power and over going to make clear what the goal is. But, for instance, Sean Duffy, Secretary of Transportation, smart guy, competent guy, unlike the last gentleman. And here he can say, this is the point of what the Department of Education does. This is what we shouldn't do, right? This is why it exists and why it exists properly. That question needs to be answered with specifics over and over again as we move forward. For instance, AI, right? Is AI good? Is AI bad? Is AI dangerous? How do we think about AI? You see JD Vance, very interesting speech. If you haven't seen it, it's only 15 minutes in France on artificial intelligence, laying out sort of a blueprint and some of the goals of how we should look at AI and what we want it to do for humanity in a good way and what we don't want it to do on the other side, right, moving forward. So it's not going to be enough just to say we're moving in the right direction, this is very good, momentum's on our side. We need to get clear on what exactly we're trying to achieve in all of these cases, whether it comes to the Department of Education. Do you want to get rid of it? Okay, great, right? Let's make that clear, make clear what the goal is. The great thing, I'm not complaining, by the way, the great thing about what's happening is I think the objectives have never been clearer to many of the people coming into the administration. I think we do have clear goals, but they need to be communicated increasingly, and I believe will be to the American public. And some of these questions are really open-ended, like, what should an American way of life that's healthy look like in the 21st century? We have things like artificial intelligence. We have, new problems coming up that we have to deal with. So let's think about how, in a realistic way, what the goal is for us, with or without government, right? Hopefully without government on our back, but how we want to live. Those questions are all resurfacing, and I just encourage everybody to rethink and get clear on what those specific goals are, because in many cases it's not clear, and you can't go backwards, to the 1950s or something. Even if you'd like to, you'd have to think about what the future looks like. And if we're remaking the government, if this is the second American Revolution, we need to get clear on what we want that future government to be.
Yeah, and I think it's very easy right now with DOGE leading the way to see all of the financial gains that have been made. And we see White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, she said, we're going to treat this federal government as a business, right? We're going to watch money in and money out. Well, right now, we love all the wins that are the financial wins. Right. And that's a very, very, very important step to figure out where all of our taxpayer money is going. And it's also a way to kind of hook the American people in and say, okay, now follow along with the rest of us. But what we see is the appointments, the confirmation hearings for a Tulsi Gabbard, an RFK Jr., and a Kash Patel are still coming up this week. The implications that those three people would have getting into the positions that they are up for and nominated for will be dramatic. And this is why these three in particular have taken so long, but this is why MAGA has been such a huge deal, right? Can we actually go through and make America healthy? Can we take all the dyes, all the crap, all the seed oils out of your food? And when you go to the grocery store, you can just buy something off the shelf that's not going to give you cancer in 10 years, right? These are the things that we're, okay, now we can actually flip the page, right? I still want all of the financial benefits from DOGE. I still want all of those dopamine hits that gives me every single day. But then what happens if Tulsi Gabbard gets in at DNI? What happens if Kash Patel becomes the FBI director? These questions, these answers get so much bigger.
Yeah, it's about reshaping government and what it's trying to do. And I think you're right. I mean, DOGE is like the key to it all, because you first have to look at concretely, where does the money go and what is your money being spent on? And once you start looking at that with, being shocked and appalled and all the stages of grief and anger and everything else, then you start to say, okay, well, what should we be doing? Right? Let's get rid of all this garbage. Let's, let Elon delete the files and let Congress come in, hopefully, and delete the files and pass a balanced budget, God forbid. But then you have to say, what should these organizations be doing? Because remember, they've been used for really evil purposes and ideological purposes on the other side for a long time. So they've been warped. They've been bent. Their shape has been bent for purposes that need to be reimagined and reestablished.
I don't know what Elon's Twitter handle is going to be tonight, but you know what? It's always a fun game. Whatever he's going to change his bio to, Elon and the boys, they're keeping it entertaining.
The most entertaining outcome is the most likely. Seems to be true so far.
At this point, that is absolutely true. We'll see you back here tomorrow night, everyone.